Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyette, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. As part of this podcast partnership with Brick and Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Amarillo National Bank, Avant Garden, and Education Credit Union. We've just finished the November-December issue of the magazine. You can find it on local newsstands later this week or subscribe at brickandelm.com. Today's guest is Andy Justus. You probably know his name. You probably know his face. He's spent the past 25 years plus in local broadcast news, including the last 20 at the KAMR4 local news desk. Now, you may not know about his tumultuous early days, though, from growing up in poverty and chaos to practically begging to be placed at Boys Ranch. Brick and Elm published an article about Andy last year, and he told us in that feature, if not for Boys Ranch, I'd probably be dead or in prison. And so I asked him on the podcast to tell that story, how he found his way out of those early struggles, how Boys Ranch provided the springboard to his future success, and how the uncertainty of his Amarillo childhood continues to drive him forward. So here's Andy Justus. Andy Justus, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, man, it is my pleasure. After talking to you for several years, like every Thursday, talking about your guests, it's fun to sit on this side of it. It's great.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to talk about this guest on Studio 4 at some point, because I'll have some things to say. Thanks for doing this. I know a little bit about your story. I think local people probably know a little bit about your story. But I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask, why are you in Amarillo?
So born and raised here. My mom had an 8th grade education. She worked in the restaurant industry for her entire life for the most part, and she met my dad. My dad had moved here. I think I don't know a whole lot about him, but he was like West Virginia area. He quit school in the 8th grade and got out of there as quickly as he could. And so somewhere along I-40, he decided to stop in Amarillo. And so they got married, and shortly after that, he left. He was a truck driver, and he bailed out, and my mom was trying to make ends meet on a $2 an hour, paycheck, which was pretty tough. So we grew up, went to 9 different elementary schools here in town, but that's what brought me to Amarillo. Is I've been here. I have a love affair with this place, and I moved off for a little bit. I mean, it was like a hot second, and I honestly could not get back quick enough. And I see myself being here for the rest of my life. I want to travel and do some things, but I truly love it here. Yeah,
I want to talk a little bit about your decision to stay here, because having grown up here, like, you don't have to stay. A lot of people don't, but and I know that was intentional on your part, but I want to hear a little bit about your path into Boys Ranch, because I know that's a big part of your story. You talk about it a lot. I think a lot of people may not realize, like, just the circumstances of your upbringing. I mean, moving so many times, being, I guess, on the edge of poverty.
We were there.
Okay. You're fully
we were fully
in
there.
it.
So my mom, again, doing the best. She's at that time, she's raising 3 of us. I had other siblings, but they had, grew up with other parents in other places. Okay. But for the most part, in that core thing, there were 3 of us. I had an older sister and a younger brother. And it was, and I would learn later, we moved so often. We were just getting evicted. We would get behind.
It's never a choice to move.
No, it wasn't, one of those things that everybody was excited about. So I we would be in one trailer house, move to this apartment, move to some friend's house, stayed on their couch for a while, and just hopped around. I mean, there were several times in my childhood where I would personally leave and live with a friend of the family for a while when things got really bad. But it was a chaotic childhood of not knowing from one day to the next where you were going to sleep or what you were going to do, what you're going to eat. My mom, she worked hard. That was one of the things that I really took from her. She worked sometimes more than one job. It was always in the restaurant business or truck stops. I remember growing up at Truck Town off of Eastern and just having this strong woman trying to do the best that she could. But it was hard. I mean, a lot of the times, my sister, in fact, quit school in the 8th grade just to take care of me and my little brother because my mom was never there. And so between jumping around to babysitters and family members and everything, it was just so chaotic where it got to the point where I was 12 years old. I was so far behind in school. I was in 2 grades behind in math and English. I was in remedial reading, which I guess would be like a dyslexia program now. Mm-hmm. It was tragic, and our home life was pretty toxic.
Did you feel it? Like a lot of kids, it's just all they know. And so they think, well, this is just how kids grow up.
Yeah.
Like, were you aware the way that I am living is different from other kids?
I really wasn't up until I was at Humphreys Highland and I was in the lunch line. And I knew that, we, didn't get new clothes that often. But back then you had these lunch cards. Do you remember these lunch cards? And they would punch them out as you would go through the line. Well, mine had a black mark through all the deals. So they wouldn't punch it, right? You would go through the line, and one of the kids in line, I remember they said, it was so, standing in line, getting ready to get food. And one of the people in line said, why is his marked out? And the kid behind him said, well, he's poor. Oh. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Right. Like, and it didn't affect me at all. But to me, it was just, that was life. Mm-hmm. Right. I can't tell you how many times I knew on Friday we would always get fed really well because my mom could write a check on Friday and she'd get paid, but it wouldn't clear. So we got good food on Friday.
Right.
That was my life. And so that was hard. It was hard. But that's why Boys Ranch, when I talk about Boys Ranch, it's such a life-changing thing for me. Most kids get sent out there. I asked my mom.
I think that's an interesting part of your story was that you sort of self-placed yourself.
Yeah, I did.
There.
I really did. So, everybody back then saw the Boys Ranch rodeo commercial. Like they'd come on the, whatever annual Boys Ranch rodeo. And I'd seen it on commercial and I'd been threatened with it. I don't know how many times, whether it was in a school situation or a parental thing of just going, hey, if you don't start doing better in school, I'm going to send you to Boys Ranch. Right. And I finally had just gotten to the point, Jason, where I wasn't getting to see my mom a lot. Anyway, she worked the 2 to 10 shift at the truck stop or restaurant, whichever one she was working at the time. My sister had no business trying to raise a couple of kids at her age. And it was just a toxic environment. And so finally, I was just like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I want to do that. And my dad had come back into my life at this point. He had always been on the periphery. It's one of those things, if his trucking route came through Amarillo, I would get to see him, but very seldom was ever pleasant for the family. And so he had come back. He had met this wonderful woman of faith, right? And so he was trying to get his act together. And she did nails. She was, and so most of the board of directors for Boys Ranch, she took care of. She had a little shop over in Wolfland. And she had been mentioning my situation. And so one day she just asked, she said, would you do that? I was like, oh yeah, I would love that. So my mom didn't know this. I went to stay with my dad one weekend, my dad and his wife, and they drove me out there and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I want to be here. So then I went back. I remember asking my mom, we were at the Kettle restaurant off I-40 in Ross. And I was like, hey, I want to go to Boys Ranch. And by this time, I'd already gone to the town office and got some paperwork. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, I really want to do this. And she was like, absolutely not. At the time, I didn't know why. She had grown up in a foster care situation that was really abusive. Yeah. So in her mind, she was like, I don't want to send you to, indigent care, I think is how she saw it. And I just was adamant and didn't let that conversation go away. And finally, she was like, all right, let's try it. And most people, I think, had this idea of a parent just takes the kid out to Boys Ranch, drops him off at the front gate and says, we'll see you later. That's not how that goes at all. There's a huge admission process. There's a lot of documents you have to fill out. And you don't know you're going to get accepted. I mean, you don't. At this point in time, I had come back to Humphreys Highland. My principal at the time was Sal Martinez. And I remember the teachers would have to fill out paperwork. And I remember all of them saying that we think this is going to be really good for you. Again, they at this time started figuring out my home situation wasn't great. I mean, I found one of my old report cards in the family Bible after my mom had passed away, and to see how many times in the 6 weeks that I wasn't there.
Wow.
Jason, if I didn't want to go to school, I didn't have to go to school. If I woke up one morning and I was too late, I just didn't go. And so there were just, again, that's another reason I was so far behind. And it didn't matter if I was at Margaret Wills or Sunrise or East Ridge or Humphreys Highland, I was behind. And so there I am, begging my mom to send me to Boys Ranch. So on July 15th in 1985, we drove out there, and that kind of changed everything.
Tell me what you found out there. I mean, from the outside, I would say you got stability.
Yeah.
People were there looking after you.
Yeah.
But like, what else?
Well, I really wanted structure, right? When you spend your entire life moving from one house to the next and doing all of these crazy things, you just want stability. I wanted to know, first off, that I had a bed. It wasn't a couch; it was a bed, and I had my own things, right? And then I had some accountability. I mean, Jason, there were times when I was young. I think I went out there when I was 12. I mean, I could stay out as late as I wanted to. I mean, there was more than one time that we got brought home by a police officer, like, "Hey, you're out way too late. You need to go home." We just had we had no guidelines. And so all of a sudden I go out to Boys Ranch. I have 3 meals a day. I'm getting up in the morning. And I think the biggest difference for me is I had somebody putting expectations on me.
Okay.
Saying, "Hey, this is what we expect. We're going to make sure that you're safe. We're going to give you food," Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? All of a sudden I'm getting those things. And it was hard at first. I'm not going to lie to you. It didn't take long for I got out there. I was like, "Oh, I think I made a mistake."
Yeah. There's a lot that changed in your life.
Everything changed. In an instant, it changes. And I think to myself, I remember I got to see my mom. They don't let you see your parent or talk to your parent for like a month. This was back then. I think rules are different now. But I remember coming into a town trip and I got in the car and I just lost it. I was like, "Get me out. Like, this is not." When you go from no structure to the most structure you can imagine.
It's oppressive.
Right. Of waking up in the morning, you had a dorm job to do, you had to go eat, then it was school, you worked. And then again, at that point in time, there were 23, I was living with 23 other kids in the back of Weigel home. That was the home I grew up in. At that time, there were 24 kids in a home. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And luckily, it was the only time my mom had ever told me no. She's like, "No, let's see this out. You really wanted to go. Let's see this out." And so I finally just found my footing, and I found people that cared about me, that truly were like, "Hey, we see something in you." And hearing somebody say, "Good job." I did not care about school. It was obviously I was failing everything. And so all of a sudden I remember the first time I made AB honor roll. It just blew my mind. I was like, "I can do this." And so then I got addicted to that affirmation that you would hear. It's like, hey, they would put your name up on the billboard. Like, "Here's the AB honor roll. Here's the All A honor roll." And so they kept setting this bar up there, and I just kept going after it. I fell in love with that. And hearing the words, "I'm proud of you."
Yeah.
I'd never heard that before. "Hey, I'm proud of you. Keep it up. Good job." All of those things that kids need to hear, I was hearing, and I liked the way it sounded.
You figured out that there were some things you were good at, that maybe like it took that kind of structure and achievement to clarify, "Oh, here's something like," I know you're in drama and things like that. And if you're just surviving, like, you don't have a chance to pursue interesting things to do.
No, I'm worried about getting home or getting to school and getting home and getting there safely. And that's on my own. I can tell you the story. There was one time I was on my way to school. My mom's boyfriend was giving me a ride. We got pulled over. There was like 8 or 10 cop cars. And living in that environment with police officers like running up to the car, and I'm a block away from home. They knew who I was. They said, "Andy, go home. We're taking him with us." And I remember walking back into my mom that day. And this is stuff kids should not experience at the age of 10 and 11. I remember walking in going, "Hey, your boyfriend just got arrested. I'm not going to school today." Like, I had seen, alcohol abuse, drug use, all of these things at such an early age. And so, I'm out there and all of a sudden I really think it was the moving around. I never felt like a stranger in a room, because when you move that often and you have to, I loved growing up in these little trailer parks and these apartments because it was a built-in family. I mean, your community is right there. Mm-hmm. So you would move in, you'd get assimilated, you'd meet some kids, and you'd go 6 months later, you'd pack up, you'd move to another place and have to do the same thing. So I never felt like a stranger in the room. And so that was something that I really took out at Boys Ranch, and didn't take me long to assimilate into it. And then feeling comfortable in my own skin, didn't matter how big the room was, I felt fine. And so I would say that my drama teacher, Denise Green, was our drama and our speech teacher, was really, I fell in love with that early on. I wrestled. That was the sport that I did when I was out there, and Paul Jones did such a great job. He and Susan Jones were amazing of taking me in and feeling like you're proficient at something. And then Denise Green with the speech and debate, that was my thing. I was like, this is it. But if I hadn't gone out to Boys Ranch, there wouldn't have been a thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't have found a thing.
I wouldn't have found the graduation
You might have found jail or something like that.
I guarantee. I mean, I always say that there's most of the members of my family, my direct family, have either been in jail or had gone to prison. So, and very few. Again, my mom didn't graduate high school. My dad, sisters, all of that. And so here I am, like going, well. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, I'll get a job, I'll work, I'll figure something out. And so it was never, college was not even a word I knew up until I went out to Boys Ranch. And so it was, and then I realized the education was my way out. That was the one thing. Boys Ranch was going to get me to 18, but what was going to happen? And I think that's the fear, right? If you get out there, you do really great, and then you go back into that toxic situation. Right. Luckily for me, I had a support group out at Boys Ranch. A family took me in. The McCaulays took me in and just kind of called me one of their own. And so I still had that stability even after Boys Ranch. And it was his guidance and love. And that's who I call my dad to this day. And my girls call him Papa. And so it's good. But Boys Ranch was that. I would have either been dead or I would have been in jail. Yeah. And there is no doubt about that. It would have been one or the other. I have one of my best friends before I went out to Boys Ranch. We did everything together. It didn't matter which school I went to. Our friendship always stayed very strong. I go out to Boys Ranch. I saw him one more time after that, never saw him again. I was at a grocery store several years ago, and a lady says, "Hey, you're the news guy." And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "You know my husband?" And she says his name. And I said, "Yeah, how's he doing?" She said, "Well, he's going to get out of prison when he's 62.
Wow.
And then, so knowing that would have been one thing. Or I can't tell you the amount of people in our neighborhood or friends of friends that had passed away. And then my own brother, like my brother was, who went out to Boys Ranch with me. My mom ended up taking him out before he graduated. So he never finished school. He got in and out of a couple of bad situations, and he ended up passing away. But he went to prison, and he had a tough life. But that's really easy for me to sit there and look at that and go, that could have been me. Yeah.
Does that change the way you go through your career? I mean, is there, people talk about, they're in a car wreck and their life flashes before their eyes and they think, oh, everything could have ended. And like you've lived like that for years. I mean, does that change how you approach your job, your career, your family, anything like that? Like, I'm just lucky to be here.
Yeah. And it's probably not healthy. I probably need some counseling on this, but
there's some childhood trauma. I would think.
I always feel like I'm running.
Yeah.
I'm trying to outrun my past. I feel like I'm a bad decision away from being broke and losing everything, right? That's just a baggage that you've got. Yeah, it's
whether
there.
It's real or not.
And again, it's why I have two jobs now. Like I'm on the news, and I also have a real estate career that I've had for almost 10 years now. But it's that thing of like, I feel like I got to keep moving. I got to keep going. And then that, means I hold my family so sacred. I don't know. I feel like I'm always running for that. And for the longest time, Jason, I didn't talk about how bad my family situation was. I would kind of gloss over it. It's like, oh yeah, I went to Boys Ranch and this, that, and the other was great. I didn't go into the minutia of the struggles that we had because I didn't want to be judged. And then I realized that that's going to be an important part of my story for people to understand. Like, it's not always perfect and it's messy. And I remember as I was telling my story, somebody was really surprised to hear all that. They were like, man, I just thought, I saw you on TV. I thought, man, you must have just had the best childhood and the greatest parents and yada, yada, yada. And the fact is I didn't. And when I found that boldness in being able to share my story and the reality and the hurt and the heartache and all of the issues is when, man, that's when some freedom set in, where I was like, it's kind of that 8 Mile moment, right? Where he's on the stage and he starts saying all the things that they were going to say about him. I was like, if I can talk about all of these things, this is who I am. This is a part of who I am. And so, yeah, it gave me strength and really helped me settle in and go, I'm okay with it. It wasn't perfect. And there are things that I wish I could have changed, but it made me who I am.
Tell me how you ended up in the broadcast media world. When did you start seeing that path?
Completely accidental, right? So I go to WT with a speech and debate scholarship, and I also did some theater while I was there. One of our sponsors of the speech and debate team, there was Guy Paul Yates, who is one of my mentors. He was amazing, and he's the reason why I was at WT. One of our kind of chaperones that would come with us was Lee Browning. Okay. Lee had just gotten back to WT, and so she would travel with us, and she became one of my mentors. And again, she was new, trying to build the broadcasting department at the time. She had just started, and I would always walk by the radio department. And another friend of mine who I grew up out at Boys Ranch and who I really looked up to, his name was Billy Dawson. I looked up to him. He was in Amarillo Radio. He was a student at WT. He grew up out at Boys Ranch, and I saw what he was doing in radio. And Lee Browning was like, you should take a class. Again, I walked by that radio station every day. I was like, okay, looks fun. I got an elective or two to spend. And man, I just fell in love with it. First of all, I just loved music. That was as a childhood, I was the kid that just listened to the radio the entire time. And I would sit there and I would call the request line, request songs. That was me. And then when recorders came out, you're recording the songs, completely into that. And so it did not take long until I realized I didn't want to do anything else. The radio was kind of how I broke that seal. And then I got into the television program and quit the speech and debate team, stopped doing theater, and just poured every ounce of myself into that broadcasting department. And I just fell in love with it. And so that's it. That's how the broadcasting thing started.
Your first local job was sports, right?
Well, yeah, kind of. So when I was at, I had so many weird jobs. When I graduated from Boys Ranch, I went to work for the United States Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
I'm out there, like, I realized at that point, and I worked with some great people, and they were very kind to me, and they paid me really well. But I realized I was like, I don't think this is my thing.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was working just, odd jobs at WT. And my first really job in broadcasting was Billy Dawson was working at KISS FM at the time, and he got me an internship. And the day I start is the day he leaves. And so I work with a friend of mine, Andy Metters, who was Drew Bennett on the radio. So my first kind of official job in broadcasting was they called me the phone monkey. That's literally, that was my name, because I just ran around and got people on the phones, helped with editing, pulled music. I was just an intern. And then John Mesh at the time would let me, Rick Matchett and John Mesh would let me DJ on the weekends. I mean, I'm making nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like $4 or $5 an hour. And then on the internship on the nightly show, I didn't make anything. It was just for class credit. So that was the initial thing. I was like, man, I really love this. And then I did some stuff at Z93. I helped one night because it was always sports. I wanted to do sport broadcasting. And so there was who I thought was one of the best sportscasters we'd had in Amarillo. His name was John Holcomb. And I went and interned with him one night just to help out with Friday Night Football. And I was like, I like this. Mm-hmm. It was just fast. Everything was going. It was that thing that really kind of really settled in on my soul, like, this feels right. And so after that point, I got a friend of mine got me a summer job working at Channel 7 as a photographer. And I did that. That's when I met Kelly James and Steve Myers and hung out with those guys. And really, Kelly mentored me up and was like, made me a better shooter, would let me do sports stories on the weekends. And that's when it really kind of clicked. And so I was at graduate school at WT by this time. I'd already graduated and went back. And I was like a graduate assistant teaching speech classes. And I ran out of money. The well went dry. And I was like, okay, I've got to go get a full-time job. So I never finished my master's degree, stopped halfway through, and then took that job at Channel 7. And it was funny. My plan was to wait out Lee Baker. And he's still doing it.
I was going to say, I think that was a lot of people's plans.
A lot of people. I admire Lee a lot. To do what he has done for all those years. But that was my thing. I was like, I want to be a sports broadcaster. I'll stay at Channel 7 and everything else. And how the Channel 4 thing worked out is I moved off to St. Louis because, in television, they don't pay you anything.
Right.
I was broke. You're just living paycheck to paycheck.
And there's a lot of turnover.
Yeah. I can't
coming
remember,
out of Amarillo.
I can't remember how
Amarillo.
many times I'd go to Amarillo National Bank. I knew that I was going to get penalized because I had to take out money I didn't have. That was a regular thing. And I kind of had that down to an art. So to make a long story short, I moved to St. Louis to work for IBM. And it was the worst 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
What year was that?
Oh, that would have been in
90s.
1997. So that was around May. And I go there and all of a sudden they signed me to I'm making $40-something thousand a year. I thought I'd made it. They gave me a signing bonus. And they're like, we don't care that you don't know anything. You match our personality test. We're gonna figure something out for you. So I'm like, man, I'm stoked about this, right? So I move down there. And as I'm driving out of Amarillo, I realize I've made a mistake. But they'd already given me this money. I'd already bought a car. It was nuts. And I'm making this long drive to St. Louis where I know no one. And I thought, oh, this is bad. So I get down there. I don't know anyone. And then I had never, out of all that I'd gone through, I'd never fought with depression, never knew what that was. And I get down there. And you get alone, and whatever plans that you thought you had fall apart, right? And so then at that point, I'm waking up, going to a job I hate, coming home to a place I hate. I just remember just thinking, how do I get out of this? And I didn't think there was an out. I honestly didn't. And so I'm sitting there. There were nights I would just sit there. I would just break down and think, what? I've messed up everything. I wanted to do television, and I have no out now. What do I do? Guy Yates called me. He's my mentor in college. Guy called me. He said, how are you? And I broke down on the phone. I said, I'm not good. And he said, I'm going to buy you a ticket. I want you to come home. Come home this weekend. So by this time I come into town and I didn't have a whole lot of weight to lose. I'd lost like 25 pounds. I was nothing. I weighed like about 150 pounds. I was just skin and bones. And I could see it on his face, the true worry that he had. And he took me, he and Lee Brown, we went to Ruby Tequila's and we're sitting there. And at this point, I was so depressed. I'd stopped really eating like I should. I was a shell of who I was. And they were like, we got to get you home. Like, this is not good. So I went back to Channel 7. I borrowed a car from a friend that weekend and drove back to Channel 7. And I said, hey, I'll take whatever. Give me any job. And the boss at the time, his name was Kent Harrell. He was very good to me. He was like, Andy, we just don't have anything right now. And I knew that I felt like my life depended on it, like I had to do something. And so my friend Craig Denny said, there's a job opening over at Channel 4. And so I went over there, and the news director at the time was Ev Avra. And I went in, and you typically, if you're applying for a job, you got a resume tape. I went over there, and I was a shell of the person that I was. And I begged for the job, Jason. I was like, I'll do anything. Please give me a job. And he said, well, we have a sports job. We're creating a sports photographer job. And another friend of mine had referred me to the job. A friend of mine who I'd worked with, he'd worked at Channel 10. His name was Jeff Barger. And so all of a sudden I'm in this interview and I was like, I don't even care what you pay me. Mm-hmm. I'll do anything. And so that was in October. So in that meeting, I said, you can hire me for a month. If I don't work out, fire me. And they were like, well, what do you make? I was like, that's $40,000. They go, oh my gosh, we can't get anywhere close to that. I was like, I don't care about that. And so I signed a deal making $6.25 an hour. I go back to St. Louis. I go to the Walgreens store and I buy 2 cases of Ensure shakes because I didn't have the energy. I didn't have anything. And I just start trying to get some semblance of a human being that can move furniture out. And I loaded up. I didn't have very much. I didn't even have a bed. I had a couch and a couple other things. I loaded it up in a U-Haul and I drove back into town at 2 a.m. October 31st of 1997. And that changed my life.
Wow. Being in St. Louis, was it the job? Was it leaving all your friends behind? Was it's not Amarillo? Like what was it?
It was everything. Everything was wrong about it.
Because a lot of people move away, find a job, make good money, and
I moved for every reason that you can think of on why you shouldn't do something is why I did it.
Okay.
Right. I was young and I thought the money would, this money is going to be life-changing. And $40,000 is not life-changing money.
No.
As it turns
But
out.
it was pretty good money in 1997.
Yeah. Well, it was more than double of what I was bringing in. Right. But it was at that time when I decided to come back, I knew that I was committing financial, it was a disaster. Because I bought a car. Remember, I bought a car. Now I can't pay for it. So I have to call the credit union and say, come get the car.
Yeah.
I wrecked my credit. I had roommates up until I got married. I had roommates just to make ends meet, right? But in that time, I didn't care. I was in love. I had a 4Runner. I was like, come get the 4Runner. I can't afford it. I couldn't afford rent, but I was so happy. That time I was mentally, I was a wreck. And so to come back, I didn't care. I'd get my paycheck in. It was a third of what I had made. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. I had been poor before.
Yeah, you knew how to do that.
I knew how to do that. I knew how to make money stretch. I knew that game. And so here we are, I think 27 years later, and I'm still at KM. So it worked out.
I want to talk about, just to kind of close this up, just because it's a topic that I'm interested in. You've in an industry with a lot of turnover. Amarillo is a bit of a pass-through market, in the media. You've been doing it for so long, and I wonder if you could talk about like how things have changed. Like what's different now from what it was like in the late 90s when you started doing this?
Oh my goodness, we probably are operating with a third of the staff. You're having to do more with less. Amarillo, the reason why Amarillo is the way it is because I consider Amarillo like a graduate. It's like almost graduate school for journalists, right? Is you get out of college, you come here, you're going to spend 2 years figuring it out. You're going to figure out a couple of things. You're going to figure out, is this the industry I want to be in? Okay. And if it is, what do I need to do to get better, to move up? Most people think because you're on television, you make all of this money. It's like, oh my gosh, you're just flush with cash. That's not how this is, especially starting out, right? You're just out there, you're grinding, you're trying to make ends meet. At the same time, luckily for me, I went to WT on scholarship. So I was able to get out of college and not have any school debt, right? That's not how most people operate. So you come out, you're making next to nothing, you're having to pay off your school loans, and you're trying to do this very hard job, right? It's very hard and has gotten more difficult in the last 10 years.
Well, because you're shooting and editing your own video now.
You're doing reporting. A little bit of everything, right? And so Amarillo, being that, was, you called it a pass-through, is you come and you get the experience, but in order to make the money that you need to start paying those debts back, you got to get that job in Oklahoma City. You got to get that job in Austin, where all of a sudden you're going to be making, double what you're making. And so one of the things that I've enjoyed through the years is being able to help that younger group come through and decide this industry is not for everybody. And it's okay if you try it and you don't like it. the great thing about a mass comm degree is there are other jobs,
Yeah.
right? And so figure out, is this what you want to do? And if it is, then how do you get to where you want to go? And so I think the biggest part of my job is to look at my friends who started here in Amarillo and are off doing amazing things. Like Michael Spencer, one of my dear friends to this day, is a news anchor now in Denver. Jordan Chavez, another guy that I totally loved working with, is also in Denver. So to see these people, or people that got out of the business and are doing great things. A friend of mine, Kaylee, just got a job promotion and she's out doing great things. So I think to see these people flourish, to see them find the soil that they need to grow in. And Amarillo is not that for everybody.
Yeah.
Man, it is for me. And so and I know it's cheesy or whatever, but I want to spend the rest of my life here. I mean, I love Amarillo. I love the people, and Amarillo has been good to me.
Have you had opportunity to leave to take that next job, next step up?
Back in the day, I was pursued pretty often. I'd have these headhunters call and be like, hey, when is your, especially in sports. But there was this moment that happened where I had to decide. All my best friends typically moved from Amarillo to Austin. Dennis De La Pena, that's a name. John High. These guys that were dear friends of mine. Dennis was one of the best mentors I ever had. They go to Austin. I'm like, well, I want to do that. Then it got to this point, was like, okay, do I want to go chase that life of moving and going from town to town and trying to do that thing? Or do I want to be here? And it was my wife, Michelle. Once we got married, I wasn't taking any more phone calls. And that it was going to be, this was where I wanted to raise a family. This is where I wanted to be. And so, again, I had to figure out, how do I make that work? If I'm not going to move to Denver and make that kind of money you make in Denver, or how do I supplement that? All my bosses have always been incredible. But 10 years ago, I found the avenue in real estate. Real estate can be that generator, that income generator for me, that allows me to stay here and not worry about taking that phone call. It doesn't matter if I got a phone call tomorrow and there's all this money on the line, please come do this job. The answer would be no. And working in real estate over the last 10 years has given me that freedom to say, it doesn't matter what I do here. I have this other career. And then my boss, honestly, I have an amazing general manager, my news director, Nylan Nichols. Nylan and I have worked together. We have been through it all. And I'd crawl over glass for her because she has been so instrumental. She's the one that believed in me in doing the news thing. When they came to me, Jason, and said, hey, you're doing sports. This is great, but we want you to move to news. I was like, you are insane. I was like, I don't want to do that. The great thing about sports is you make nobody angry.
Yeah.
You're just saying who won or lost. I was like, I don't want to get into that. I prayed about it, sought some counsel on it, but she believed in me way before I did. I was like, you are crazy. And so that was one of the best job decisions I'd ever made, was going from sports to news.
Last question I wanted to ask you is just about the people here. Because you are a high profile figure, people see you. I mean, fewer people, I guess, than used to, but people see you on the news on a regular basis. And that results in interesting encounters when you're out, because you're also showing houses, which adds another element to it. But what have you learned about the people who live here, being somebody who grew up here, moved away, needed to get back, and then now you're in this position where everybody recognizes you?
9.9 out of 10 times, it's just such a great encounter, right? People here, people are very giving. We love our nonprofits. We love pouring in, and it's the funnest encounters, though, whether I'm picking out an avocado at United and somebody just comes up and we start chatting about the weather. You never meet a stranger here. And I think that says something. And I always tell my real estate clients who are moving here from out of state, I'm like, look, what we don't have in trees, we make up with people. Don't have a lot of trees, but we got good people. And what's funny is years later, they come back and they're like, you weren't kidding. It is a different world here. And I think that's what keeps people here, is the people. And I love it. And the random conversations that you get to have, whether it's I'm dropping off my kid at school and I see somebody I didn't know, but you feel like, I don't know, you feel like everybody's your friend.
Yeah.
Until they make a comment on your Facebook post and then you're like, I guess not.
Everybody's friends in real life.
Yeah, in real life, it's great. Yeah.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Amarillo Habitat for Humanity. Amarillo Habitat is making a lasting difference by partnering with local families to build and purchase affordable homes. This year, during the Panhandle Gives, which is November 25th to December 3rd, your donations will be amplified, which maximizes your impact. And with your support, Habitat can not only build homes, but also empower families to become confident, successful homeowners. Together, we can build hope and brighter futures for our neighbors. So make an impact, change a life, build a home, and support Amarillo Habitat for Humanity during the Panhandle Gives. Learn more at amarillohabitat.org. Okay, I'm back with Andy Justus. Andy, this is a part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes a display of gear worn by area cowboys over the years, which includes everything from leather Nakona boots from 1910 to a mobile phone from 1995, which is fun to see. And these were things that were actually used on local ranches and gathered for the museum. You can see that at panhandleplains.org.
I love that place.
Yep.
I love it so much. And you forget, like, we used to take the girls all the time and we'd have a great time. And then you'd come back the next time. You're like, oh yeah, this is why I love this place so much. That's such a hidden gem. More people need to get out there and take a look at what they're doing down there.
Well, my favorite thing is that I'm of the age now where I can go and see like that display and see that phone and be like, I had a phone like that. Mm-hmm. I had one of those cellular flip phones that cowboys used and is in a history museum. So
all right, what you and I need to figure out is how we need to go down. I want to go look at the archives. I've heard that the archives of the Panhandle Plains Museum will leave you in awe. And yes. I've always wanted to go see it.
You'll never forget it.
Yeah. You've got to see it already.
0.01% maybe of people living here have ever seen anything like that.
I need to talk to Andrew. I need to see if Andrew can get me down there.
When you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
I hope that we invest more in our children and with schools and with parks. And here's the thing, 10 years from now, my kids are going to be gone. They're going to be off doing their own thing. But I want to be able for Amarillo to build up something and start investing. And I know it's hard. Mm-hmm. I know it's hard to put those dollars into those parks and schools. And I want us to grow in that way. I want us to be proud of what we are providing for our children.
Yeah.
I think we could definitely use more of that. And maybe an HEB. I'd like to see an HEB in about 10 years.
Well, the investing, as would a lot of people.
Yeah.
That investing in the next generation thing is not a decision you can just make and then catch up. Like it's a decision that needs to be made now or that we needed to have made 15 years ago. And then we would be seeing some fruits. It's such a big project.
Yeah.
And there's so many pieces that like it requires an ongoing emphasis.
Yeah.
And I fear like we're at a catch-up phase and it's still going to be a while.
And once you get behind, it's hard to catch up. Like when you go to these different towns and you see, especially it's kind of hard, but like Frisco, you see all the things that are happening down in the DFW area with the schools and all of the resources. And I know that they have a larger tax base than we do. But at some point, we have to decide what our priorities are moving forward. And then put our money where our mouth is, right? Yeah. Say is it going to be fine but don't we want to be better? Don't we want to move forward and leave our kids and our grandkids with something better than what we had, as opposed to the same thing? But you're right. I don't know how to do that. I don't have that answer. I don't know how we do that, but I think we have to sit down and go, hey, this is going to be tough. This is going to take a sacrifice for us to do this. But let's move forward and try to do the best we can.
Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
A lot of convenience stores. And it's good. I mean, it's nice. I can catch a toot and totem on every corner. But I think when you go to other places, I'm like, man, our kids make a joke about every time there's a lot. They're like, I bet you it's another convenience store, Dad. And typically.
Often it is.
Often often is. But
And now we've got the mother of all convenience stores about to open.
I know.
And the Buc-ee's, and I like, what does that do? You know, will you just be driving all the way out to the airport in order to get your?
No, man. I've got a couple of Toot Totems that I hit on the regular. I've got my regular stops. I don't think I'm going to be making a trip out there anytime soon. I'm glad, but here's the thing. I say that, Jason, but at the same time, those are such big economic drivers for our city. And those, whether it's Packensack, Toot Totem, we're getting Circle K's now. There's Buc-ee's. As long as it is driving dollars into our communities, I would say that's a good thing. You know, all joking aside about the convenience stores, but I think because again, if we're going to do all the stuff that we talk about, investing in the kids and we've got to increase our tax base. We've got to do all those.
Well,
things.
If the market wasn't there for it, they wouldn't be putting them in. I mean, I feel like Toot Totem knows what they're doing, and so if they think we need to be on this corner, they're probably right.
Yeah.
Okay, what does this area not have enough of?
We don't have enough foster parents. So I think one of the things in talking with these local nonprofits, one of the things I was shocked at, I did an interview the other day, and in our area, I think it kind of included a little bit of Lubbock, High Plains and South Plains. I think the number was 400 kids are waiting for adoption in foster care. We need more foster parents because that's a mission field to me. You know, it's it was heartbreaking when she said that number to me the other day. Well, I've always known it was high in our area, but I would think that is something that, you know, we could get the church leaders of our community together and say, hey, what can we do to help these kids and these families? 400. That is just a crazy number to me.
And if they don't find somebody local, I mean, what, do you leave the area and leave?
Yeah.
You know, your existing relatives.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's so complicated.
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite local neighborhood? Real estate agent. You see a lot of them.
Olson is my favorite neighborhood, and because we live over there, and all, you know, our kids have gone to Olson. They're in Crockett now, and it's because we have a little bit of everything, right? We have, but our little place, it's still like a little slice of Americana. Our kids run up and down the street. They're playing. There's lemonade stands. There's all of these. It just is. And I love it because when my kids are out, everybody on the block knows everybody.
Yeah.
It really, I feel like we're stepping back into a 50s painting almost of kids just playing out in the yard. I'll drive home. I drove home the other day and there were, I think, 7 bikes parked in our driveway. And I was like, this is cool.
Yeah. You want to be that house.
Yeah.
You want to be the house that all the kids come to.
And so it's been good. Olson is my sweet little place. I love it.
What's your favorite local restaurant?
This is and when you present this to me so I could give some thought into these questions, that's the hardest question because I have so many that I love. I would say that like date night for me, OHMS. Okay. Like I love that place so much. I think that is just, man, golden light. You want to, April 24th, every April 24th, you will find me there eating lunch. That's my birthday lunch. I don't even have to have anybody go with me. I will go and I will sit there and I will have a green chili bacon cheeseburger with some fries. If it's a weekend, I'll have a cold beer and just enjoy that. I'm going to give Golden Light. Golden Light.
I think, Golden Light and OHMS, not the same places.
No.
Different atmospheres, but I don't think anybody would argue with that.
Okay.
What's the most underrated aspect of living in the Panhandle?
Most underrated aspect of living in the Panhandle is feeling like you're surrounded by people that got your back, that truly have your best interest. If something happened to me, or I know that the community would rally. They rally around anybody and everybody of the causes, and we have an abundance of giving people who love their community, love their people. And every time Panhandle Gives comes up, I'm always shocked at the amount of help and assistance. So that's what we've got.
Speaking of Panhandle Gives, what's your favorite local nonprofit?
Okay, I think I have Boys Ranch because of the difference that it made in my life and it continues to make. I just went out and announced the rodeo a while back, and they're still making a difference. It's changed throughout the years. As everything changes, Boys Ranch continues to impact. And it's I always say there's nothing magical about Boys Ranch. It's in a great location. It's beautiful. You need to go out and see it. But it's the people who work there. That is a mission field, to be able to be out there and be a house parent. I think it's one of the best jobs that you can do. You talk about foster, we're talking about foster parents and whatnot. These people are true heroes that they go out and add to their family. We have so many. It means something to me because I grew up without, and I wish we would have had this service, Colorful Closets of Amarillo. I never felt like I was dressed well.
Right.
I felt like, most of the clothes were probably not even clean. But what they're doing over there is they're giving these kids dignity and confidence by putting clothes on their back, and you'd be amazed at what that will do for somebody's confidence. Right. I didn't have it. And so when Colorful Closets is one of those organizations, when they call and they ask me for something, it's a yes. It is an absolute yes, because it would have probably made the biggest difference in my childhood. I truly believe that.
Okay, last question. When was the last time you visited the Big Texan?
I asked Michelle this because Michelle has a much better memory. It probably was more than 5 to actually sit down and eat there, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I've been out there for other events.
Yeah, sure.
The Starlight Ranch and everything, but and it's always. And I think at that time, one of my Boys Ranch brothers came by, and another one of the people that we went to Boys Ranch came into town, and they hadn't been out there in a while, and so we were like, let's go. Or it's always like a family member who comes in and is like, man, I've always wanted to go out there, and you go out there. Bobby Lee and Danny Lee they've got that thing figured out.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
I want them to get to know Outdoor Amarillo. Okay. Outdoor Amarillo is a nonprofit that I'm really into right now, because I feel like our parks are one of the things that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And they are a nonprofit that wants to improve our parks. And it's hard. I get it. Like, you can't really pull the money from the school. The city doesn't have any money. So what do? So you create a nonprofit, Outdoor Amarillo, where they can raise nonprofit funds and write grants to be able to help these parks. So whether it is maybe a new soccer field in East Ridge, or whether it is tennis courts in Paramount, or new lighting at Olson, whatever it is, I think we're going to continue to see more and more of what Outdoor Amarillo is doing in our community. I highly endorse that nonprofit. I want you to look into it. And because I want those things to get better in our community. And I feel like that is the avenue right now. That is the easiest avenue, because it's hard to ask for tax dollars.
Right.
It's hard to ask for school dollars. They're struggling as it is. So with these nonprofits and these groups working hard to improve those things.
Okay.
I'll take that.
That's a good recommendation. Andy Justus, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Andy for the interview. You can watch him, of course, on the KAMR Local 4 News Desk at 5, 6, and 10 p.m. on weekdays. Thanks also to Amarillo Habitat for Humanity and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast, and to Angelina Marie for editing every week. And thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, Corey Burns, Josh Wood, Wes Reeves, Cindy Graham, and Barbara and Jim Whitten. This has been episode 376. My name is Jason Boyette, and I'll see you next week.